Welcome to a new release on the show. This is the 5 questions to nourish the mind, body and soul, to get to know the person sat in front of me a little bit more and ask them questions they wouldn't normally have. This has become very quickly one of my favourite parts of the interview. Now, we are re-releasing these because we released these months ago for our paid subscribers over on my newsletter, The Compassionate Cure on Substack. If you're not a paid subscriber, you will get these months in advance as being part of our community. However, we are now starting to release them. So enjoy. This is more of a personal connection and a shorter episode, but it really gets into the heart and not into the mind of the person who is sat in front of me. Okay, Oliver, we are going to do the 5 questions to nourish your body, your mind, and your soul. So as I just said, try and answer from your heart and not from the mind, which is not what any of us are used to doing.
Certainly not what comes naturally to me, no.
So I want to start with my first question, which is, what is one small thing about you that makes you you?
Wow. The thing that's coming to my mind is that I talk out loud to myself in private a lot. Not always in a kind of self-berating or even self-nourishing way, but just to feel my way through the day in some sense. So I think if you had a surveillance device in my writing room, for example, you would think I was a very strange person, except that I think a lot of people do it.
I was going to say, I don't think that you're strange. I completely align. Plus, you're also speaking it out loud, which I then think helps cement your thoughts much clearer. So I think that's quite a good tactic.
I'm so glad. I'm so glad. It's the truth. That's all I can say. Yeah.
That's what we want, authenticity. So the next one I want to ask you is, what has been the most persistent area of resistance in your life and how did you overcome it?
I think that probably an area of resistance that is really a big deal for me is sort of being willing to. It's going to sound self-indulgent. I'm self-editing. Is being willing to move in the direction of things I enjoy doing instead of the things that I think are my obligations to other people. And one of the ways that I've overcome it, although I'm still in the process of overcoming it, is to realize that again and again, it actually seems to end up serving the other people as well to do that, and that going around trying to feel like I've fulfilled my obligations to other people is more likely to just kind of annoy them. So it's a win-win.
That is a win-win. That's a long journey as well, actually, getting to understand why you're doing something for you, which I think is an ongoing journey for most people.
That's the only evidence I have. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
I love that. Okay. Now the next one. What's the smallest change that has brought the most ease into your life?
The smallest change that has brought the most ease. In the course of researching my most recent book, I came across a book called Choosing Easy World, which is quite old now and very much comes from a kind of a new agey place that I'm just primed to reject and not want anything to do with. But in it, the author, whose name is Julia Rogers Hamrick, talks about sort of resetting herself during the course of the day by, as she puts it, choosing to live in easy world. So to face something that she's going through, or some prospect or some work that she needs to do or something, just sort of deciding that she's going to approach it in easy world, which I could go into much more detail about what she means by that, but it doesn't mean sort of using your willpower to insist that it goes well or anything like that. It's not this kind of trying to force anything onto reality, but just kind of like resetting, recalibrating so as to go into the next bit of the day, at least being open to the possibility that it might all just go fine, actually, and not be incredibly stressful and end in a big catastrophe, which is definitely my natural preference for going through the day.
So your smallest change would be to relax into the day, that if things change, that's okay, but they may not change. Or
even just to like try reciting this mantra she suggests, which is like, I choose to live in easy world. I know it sounds a little ridiculous and simplistic, but don't knock it till you've tried it, is what I would say.
Well, the biggest thing, I think, I know it sounds easier, but it's easier to have the critical voice in your head that everything's going to go wrong. So actually saying that out loud, which takes me all the way back to the first question, you cementing that is actually a very calming aspect.
Yeah, and something I've found again and again with all of this stuff is that it's also okay that you just have to kind of circle back around to it and erode the old way of doing things another tiny little bit, and not expect to sort of press a button and have it all perfectly changed from now on. Yeah,
because that's just not life.
Correct.
So the next one is more of a health question that we're going to go into. So this can be anything. I don't feel like you've got to come on and say you've done the Ironman. It could be very small to very large. What's the one health-related change that you've made that has significantly impacted your well-being?
I feel like I'm at a inflection point in my life where I want to do quite a few more of these, rather than looking back. It's more like now is a time when I want to start taking this more seriously. But I think that probably moving to a sort of quite hilly part of the North York Moors, as we did a few years ago, has been this, because there's no difficulty in sort of getting out into quite sort of rugged terrain where I actually like to walk, or to some extent run. And also, to put it in the language of obligation, there's kind of no excuse anymore as well. It's like, what are you going to do? You're going to sit in this house surrounded by these moor tops, and you're not going to go and kind of engage physically with them. So I think that probably is it. It's like an environmental change that made healthy behavior a bit easier.
Well, I think that's the biggest friction point. As soon as you're put into the environment, it's easier to have these behaviors. But also the periphery of your sight is so much more expanded on the landscape. So you have a much larger open vision, which naturally calms you into the parasympathetic than London, where I wake up and I don't have this expansive landscape. So my vision is very narrow, and that increases your sympathetic nervous system.
You're the expert here, but that totally makes sense to me, and I can feel some kind of calming or regulation or something that's going on in me as a result of living there, and still finding there's something very, very relishable about the trips I get to make to the big city. Like that, it's almost better as a result. So yeah. Definitely that. And then I talk to myself, of course, out loud while I'm walking along on the moor.
Sounds like a great life. Sounds like you've got it completely on point.
That part of it is pretty great. I'm not going to deny it.
So the last one is, I love that you said this is going forward, because now I'm going to ask you a question on the peace with the past. Mm-hmm. Okay, so now looking back, what's been one of the hardest things that you've had to make peace with about your life, about yourself, or your life in general?
What comes up, I think, is just a pretty full spectrum point that it's been very powerful for me to sort of move towards the notion that on some level I might always be on the anxious end of the human spectrum. I might always be a bit of a catastrophist. I might always obsess too much about like travel plans that actually don't matter, like trains that nothing bad would happen if you missed them, and all the rest of it. So that idea that whatever it is that bugs you about yourself might sort of always be around. There's a psychotherapist called Bruce Tift. I don't know if you've come across his work, who's very sort of makes this point that it can be incredibly liberating to just sort of think, oh, right, maybe this is just going to be a bit of who I am for the rest of my life. Not in the sense of like, so give up trying to change, but actually that's what allows you to then change in productive ways and to like get on with life, because you're no longer saying, I can't get on with life until I have solved this issue about myself. It's like, no, it's just part of me. So fine. And now what should we do? I'm not claiming that I've reached that position in any sort of perfect way.
It sounds like you've got a lot of awareness of it, and I think that's the biggest part of it. Because as you said, that is part of your character. It's part of your imperfectness, which makes us human, which is my biggest relationship with self-compassion. And this is your entire work with your newsletter, The Imperfectionist. So kind of coming to awareness of like what you believe your strengths and weaknesses are, I think are so important. And everyone has them, and we accept them all of our friends and family.
Yes,
so
exactly.
accepting them of ourselves is the biggest thing.
Absolutely, totally.
Amazing. Oliver, thank you so much for the 5 questions. I hope that wasn't too daunting for you.
No, but as with so many things in life, it went better than I was expecting.
You did very well and somehow ended on a full circle like you knew what I was going to ask you, which, by the way, you didn't.
That's true. I didn't.
So thank you very much.